How's it going, everyone? Sethphir here, and welcome back to another Honkai Star Rail video. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a tier list that's going to be updated for the release of Jing Yuan. This is going to be some important information to go ahead and take a look at because it's going to determine what type of characters we're going to want to invest in for the long run. Now, I've been doing a lot of research looking at the Chinese tier list, comparing them to the NA tier list, as well as from the other regions, and then also understanding a little bit more about what the end game is for Honkai Star Rail. So let's go ahead and talk about that first, and then we'll get right into our tier list. Alright, so your end game is going to consist entirely of the Memory of Chaos. Simulated Universe is slightly complex, but with the path bonuses, you'll be able to clear it no problem in majority of cases. So where the real fun starts is after you beat the first 15 floors, and you get into the Memory of Chaos, and this is where things start to get spicy. You can see higher level enemies, along with a lot of mobs coming with the enemies, and this is going to strongly determine why our tier list is going to be the way it is, because everything in the Memory of Chaos is being built around killing these bosses within a certain amount of cycles. So we're on a timer here, so we need to go fast. And the best way to go fast is to build team comps instead of shifting from that 2 support meta. I think we're going into a 1 support meta, and there are going to be very few characters that can deal with that. But what that's going to allow you to do is run 1 single support and then have the 3 DPS characters needed to actually beat these encounters. I have cleared up to floor 4 on the Memory of Chaos, and this is completely free to play. I am still level 45, so I don't have the level 70 advancement, so these mobs are actually scaling on me quite hard. So let's go ahead and start talking about that tier list and what I believe the future of the meta is going to look like. Alright, here we are with the tier list, and I'm going to give it to you straight up front. I'm not going to go by each character one by one, but I will give commentary on why things are the way they are. So when we're talking about the end game, we're talking about that Memory of Chaos as per usual. You can have 2 teams. That's what's required, right? 2 teams, so you're always going to be using 8 characters max. You will flip characters around depending on the elemental weakness of the boss, but for the most part, you're going to have some pretty staple characters in every single roster. The only 2 characters that I have seen so far that are actually capable of solo supporting an entire roster is going to be Bailu and Gepard. These 2 are very important because once you start to build them up and you start to get some of their 4 and 5 star light cones, especially for Gepard, that allows you to taunt a little bit extra, and unlocking their talents, which allow them to really fully support a team. This is going to be a big lifesaver because you're going to be able to run 3 characters that are actually doing damage instead of only 2. I know that a lot of people right now are getting by with like Fire MC and Natasha combo, or like March and Fire MC, some sort of combination like that. And while that will allow you to clear the encounter eventually, the problem is the turn limit within the Memory of Chaos. So we're having to beat these encounters in 7 turns or less, or 10 turns or less. So the only way we could possibly achieve that, right, winning in the end game, is by bringing in more damage. So having a solo support is going to be the reason that's going to allow you to tip those scales in your favor and actually clear the encounter with more than just like 1 star or 0 stars. And it will be a bit of a struggle. Do keep in mind that as we gain more levels, this is just going to get easier because a lot of these mobs are just simply level scaling on us. So they're getting increased toughness, taking lower damage because their defense is so high. So this will eventually shape up to where you could probably clear it with majority of characters. But for now, if you want to prog, if you want to progress, and you want to have that best possible roster and get all the stars, you're probably going to be looking towards these. So now that we talked a little bit about these support characters, these characters are going to be pretty much in every single team lineup that you could possibly imagine. You could use Natasha as a substitute, but I found it really hard for Natasha to solo heal an entire team. It feels like it's a little bit difficult for her to do that. So since we have these 2 characters here, that's going to be 2 out of our 8 characters on the roster. So now let's start talking about DPS characters. Seele, without a doubt, is going to be the best damage dealer in the game, especially single target. And with the upcoming release of Jing Yuan, he is going to be one of the better characters that you can also get. He's going to have really strong single target DPS, but more importantly, he's going to do massive AoE damage. And this is really good because a lot of those encounters that I showed you, you're going to have to fight a boss monster or two boss monsters plus like four ads. So there's going to be a lot of units on the field. So being able to clear them out quickly and whittle them down to just the boss is going to be really important, especially so that your team doesn't die before you can even start to complete the encounter. So this is going to be why these two characters are the most important, because I think they're going to be the cornerstone of a DPS for any team. Now, moving on to this third character, it's going to be Bronya. She is probably the best supporting character in the game because she enables DPS carries and she hyper enables Seele. So the combo of Bronya and Seele is absolutely disgusting and will deal a ridiculous amount of damage. So if we're thinking theoretical best, like these five characters are always going to be on our roster, right? That means there's only three other possible characters that we could add to our roster. So that's where things start to get a little bit picky because we want damage. We can't afford to put in that much support and healing. So let's start talking about that A tier right now. A tier is very interesting because I think a lot of the A tier is going to depend on the elemental weakness of the monster. Whereas these characters in the S tier, I feel like you would just want to use them no matter what in order to actually apply good damage to the boss once it's, you know, so you can actually whittle the life bar down. But I feel like these A tier characters are all built around the type element. So you want to break the weakness so that the boss monster isn't just completely destroying you, and then use your other DPS characters to whittle them down. So I think that Clara is in a really good position because she's a strong sub defensive unit. She's like a sort of like a support. So you could potentially run like Clara and Natasha. And I think that that might be enough to keep a team up. So having that option as a combo, if you don't have Bailu or Gepard, is going to be really good, especially for players that are free to play, because you most likely have Natasha and you probably don't have all these super awesome S-rank characters. So this is going to be a really good character to have because it's going to deal massive amounts of AoE damage. You're going to be able to clear up the trash mobs and get directly to the boss as quickly as possible. And a lot of these bosses have many multi-hit attacks. They take a lot of turns. So adding in that extra counter attack with Savrog is going to be really good. Yan is a very powerful ice DPS, I will say, because he is probably one of the few that scales the highest on crit and crit damage. So if you ever need to sub him in for the official type weakness, he is definitely going to be very, very strong on that. And then we come up with a couple of interesting characters here, which is going to be, the first one's going to be Welt. Welt is going to be a character who's really good at breaking imaginary shield, but also he's going to allow you to stop the monster or the boss from taking action. And this is actually kind of important because these boss monsters hit incredibly hard, and it's really hard to deal with them sometimes. So being able to imprison and to slow the target can be very, very useful. And Tinyun, in my opinion, is probably one of the better 4 stars. Now that I've seen the game develop a good bit, this character is going to be good for a long time because she's basically a budget Bronya. Like, she's Bronya, but a bit worse. So being able to put her into a secondary team and enable another carry is going to be incredibly powerful. She has a lot to offer in terms of just sort of mirroring or duplicating that carry's DPS, so it makes her a good option. And then the sleeper part of her is that she doesn't require that many skill points, so you can actually use her skill once every 3 turns, and the rest of the turns you can just purely auto and get the maximum value. So this is going to be a very, very strong way to play this character. And lastly, the other benefit of her is that she can make use of a lot of the bad artifacts that you've been getting, like those attack power artifacts. Those are all really good on her, especially if you have something like attack on the body or attack on the orb or something like that. You can actually utilize it with this character since she scales so heavily off of attack, and that's how she provides her buffs. Then we have sort of a nice lineup of 4-star characters here. Dan is up here because he does do quite a lot of damage. Not as much as Seele, but he is like the only wind option besides Bronya and maybe Sanpo, but he's just not that great. So he's definitely up there. Dan is a really strong investment. And Hook has kind of surprised me. She deals a large amount of fire damage, actually. So this character is probably up here due to her just being the only fire option for single target. We also have Himeko, but she's down a little bit lower because AoE encounters seem to not be as prevalent, so we don't see that many of them. Another character that I bumped up on my tier list was Asta. I didn't think it was that good at first, but in order for this character to shine, you want to kind of be able to break the fire weakness of an enemy, and she's really good at doing that. And not to mention, she has a really powerful speed buff ultimate that can kind of turn the tides for a fight for you. So if you use this in combination with like Hook on a firefight, it can carry you through that encounter, particularly in the Memory of Chaos. And of course, there's other fire options like Fire MC and Himeko that you can rely on, but she definitely is up there in terms of her capabilities for what she can do. And next up, we have Sushang. Sushang is very powerful as a physical damage. She just does one thing and one thing well. That's dealing direct damage to one target. So if you need somebody to smack a boss down that's weak to physical, Sushang is definitely going to be up there for you. And then we have the classic tried and true Fire MC. Fire MC is phenomenal at dealing break damage to the enemy's weakness. So this is what Fire MC is mostly used for. It will also give you a preservation tank to be targeted, which can be good as well. So I think that this character is still up there, especially for specific encounters. And then last but not least, we have Natasha. Natasha is essentially the budget Bailu. It's what you use if you don't have Gepard, you don't have Bailu, and you need a support, that's going to be Natasha. She does have an extra bonus that you might sub her in on some levels for, which would be her ability to actually cleanse a debuff. In the Memory of Chaos, there's a lot of these like Centaur Archer guys that love to deal massive damage if you have a wind debuff on you, so being able to peel that off of your characters is really, really good. So I would definitely say that she's a strong investment as well. And then we're going to briefly go over the B, C, and D characters. To be honest, the D characters don't offer anything. They don't do particularly great damage. They come with a large drawback. Their scaling is not that good. So I'm not going to mention much about them. The C characters have a niche in some encounters, in some fights. And I would honestly say Pella could maybe be in the B area, but we don't see that many encounters that require you to dispel a monster or anything like that. I think when paired with Yan, she is actually a little bit better because Pella will be able to provide ice weakness for you. And the same with Sampo. Sampo could possibly go up to B tier when he's paired with like Dan or Bronya, because being able to stack the wind buff can be really nice for him. But these characters are often like conditional at best. So that's what I would say about them. The B tier characters, however, are pretty good. And the reason why I'm bumping Serval down, I usually rated her a little bit higher, is because her replacement is coming in like 5 days, right? Or however long it is until Jing Yuan is out. Jing Yuan does everything that she does, just better. You would have to get an E6 Serval, so like the max rank Serval, just to beat Jing Yuan at the lowest level. So I think that she definitely got moved down a bit with the upcoming of this character. Himeko is, I think, a valuable character, and I would potentially put her in the A tier in some encounters, but only encounters where you need to deal AoE DPS, as she doesn't offer that much for a single target in particular, so I will bump her down a little bit as well. And I also put March down. I initially rated March a little bit higher. I think that due to the meta shifting towards one support, March is becoming not as good because she's a secondary defensive character that cannot sustain a team alone. Even at her Eidolon 6, which provides a little bit of healing, I'm not sure if she's quite there. I'll experiment a little bit more with it and maybe bump her up a little bit, but I think for now, I'm pretty happy with her at the B tier. So that's going to be my tier list and explanation. I hope that everything is sound and kind of rooted in logic here, as we've seen a little bit more of the end game. I'm going to keep updating and making these tier lists as I learn more. Each one will be better than the last, of course, as time goes on and everybody gains more experience and knowledge within the game. Go ahead and comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this tier list. Do you think anything should be a little bit higher, a little bit lower? What has been your experience in the Memory of Chaos? How high have you cleared? And what sort of trends are you seeing with these characters? I'm interested to see what happens in the future, because if these top characters, these 5 are here, and the new characters come out like Silver Wolf and Locha, I feel like all these other characters are just going to go further and further down the list, and these new characters are going to keep becoming like better and better, so there might be a bit of power creep going on here. We'll have to see how the future looks for that one. But I think all in all, I think it'll still be all right. I think there are some cornerstone characters that will stay good for a long time, and I'm pretty happy to see that on the tier list right now. Okay, thanks for your time and watching the video. I truly appreciate that. Make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell if you found this information useful, and we will see you in the next one.